if you've got painful hips, unstable hips, joint pain, then you're in the right place, because we're chatting all things hips today, hypermobile hip joints. And obviously this is a big issue for many of us with hypermobility and EDS. We have, a lot of problems with our hips generally. So I'm Jeannie de Bon. Those of you who don't know, I'm a movement therapist who specialises in EDS, hypermobility, and the chronic pain that tends to go with those conditions. So feel free to, hi Lorna, hi, thank you for saying hello. Feel free to pop any specific questions in the chat while I'm here, and I can answer the chat as we go along. I've got my skeleton in the background just so we can have a very quick look at the sort of anatomy and the structure of the hip. We're not going to spend too long on that, but I always think a little bit of education really helps us understand what our body is capable of, and especially if you've got hypermobility. If you've got a band, oh sorry, that's not a band, that's a ball. If you've got a ball and a band, grab that if you need. Hi there, Mandy, hi. If you've got a cushion, if you need a head cushion, go and grab that now. So I've got a band. I might use a loop band during the class just for speed, so I don't have to untie and tie the band, but you don't need a loop band. You can use this. If you don't have a band, you could use a scarf or something, or a tie. Hi Heather, great for you to join us, thank you. Lovely to see you all. So as I was saying, don't forget to pop any questions in that chat box while we're chatting here, and I can answer those for you. So let's talk hips. Now if you're talking hips, obviously you've got to talk pelvis and probably below the hip as well. So if you saw last month's live class, we talked about the feet. If you remember, we were talking about how the alignment of the feet not only affects the feet, it spirals everything in, knees and femurs, and obviously that's going to impact our pelvis. So this skeleton is not in the best of shapes. He hasn't got a head anymore, and he's actually got a really bad scoliosis, which you can't see. But he's still here. So he's not the best example. Someone's just asking a question. Great timing, having a labral reconstruction done in a couple of weeks. Ah, well that's interesting. I was going to talk about labrum tears, very common in our population. Do you have any suggestions for prehab and strengthening? Yes. So I've also had that operation done on my right hip. Probably 2012, no, 2011, 2010, long time ago anyway. Absolutely brilliant afterwards. So we'll talk about why we get those and why it's important to rehab that. I've torn the other one. I haven't had surgery on the other one. I've managed it through exercise and through strengthening. So surgery doesn't always, obviously everyone's different, but not everyone ends up having surgery. I think there are a lot of people out there with labrum tears who don't have surgery. Mine was particularly bad. I was having a lot of back pain with it, and I developed spurs, so growth spurs on the head of the femur because there was too much force going through there. It wasn't stable enough, so they had to shave all of that off. Great, lovely to have you here. Thank you. So yeah, they're very common. So what is that? What is that that's going on? So let's just talk about that before we talk about alignment. So this obviously isn't a great representation because the head of the femur is hanging out of the hip joint, the hip socket. So this guy's obviously had some dislocated hips. Okay, so in theory, this ball, so the head of your femur is a ball, and that fits inside, because this guy's hips don't move, but that fits inside the hip socket, this bit here, okay? Now around this bit here, where I've got my finger, that's where the labrum is, and that's a thick fibrocartilage that really acts as a very strong suction pad. So it sucks It's supposed to give, well, it does give stability to the hip joint, and it sucks and holds that femur head in the socket. You know, and I've done a dissection on a cadaver, and you can really pull that out. And if you try, and this is on a cadaver, when you go to put it back in, it still sucks it back in, even with dead tissue. So it's super strong. So it's giving stability, obviously, 360 degrees around that. So when it gets torn, wherever that might be, that could be anywhere around there, it's going to destabilize that suction pad. Okay, so when that gets destabilized, that's why I was getting back pain, because I didn't have hip stability as much anymore. I was compensating in my lower back. As soon as I had the operation, the back pain disappeared literally overnight. Okay, so with that surgery, they basically tighten everything up. You might notice on some of my videos, especially in standing ones, I don't have the same range of movement in my right hip. Okay, so if you have a surgery, wherever you have surgery, shoulders, hips, wherever, the body will never be exactly the same as it was before, because they've messed around, they've tightened things up. So I have restricted movement here, but I'm still functional. I can do everything I need to do. I don't have pain anymore. So that's the important thing, right? We don't want to have pain, and we want to be functional. So those surgeries can be really, really good. Now, so obviously you've got your hip joints coming into your pelvis, and we were just saying about the feet. So if the feet are rolling in, the shin bones roll in, the femurs roll in. So this happens, yeah, so you get internal rotation of your femurs, which makes your knees knock together. Now, typically, when that happens, it pulls the pelvis. I can't really see the pelvis. Let me just tip you up a minute so you can see him. You can see his scoliosis there, look now, and he hasn't got a head. But when that happens, the pelvis gets pulled forward into an anterior tilt, so a forward tilt. That then causes an increase in our lumbar spine, yeah, so we can get that backache. Okay, so ideally your pelvis, you see these points here, you've got these two bones here, and then you've got your pubic bone. So this triangle ideally is always facing forward in a neutral position. Okay, so we want that neutral. For many of us it's tipped forward, yeah, for some of us we can slouch back, but this is our optimum position. Okay, so the ligaments at the front, so we have really strong, lot of ligaments around here. The ones at the front tend to be a bit stronger, and there are less of them at the front. And at the back, interestingly, they're not as strong, but you've got more of them. Okay, so their job is to pull the femur head back into the socket. Now, this is just my view. I have no idea if this is correct, but I do know that a lot of us lack strength in our posterior chain. Now, if that's the case, are we allowing that femur head to slip forward because those ligaments are not being sucked back enough? Let me just see what someone's saying. Someone else had the same operation. Oh, I missed what it said. Be careful during your recovery, I think they said. So yeah, as with any surgery, hopefully you'll be given guidelines from the hospital where you're having it done. A lot of the rehab I was given was basic Pilates type exercises. You can't rush these things. I was on crutches for 6 weeks, couldn't drive for 3 months. You know, you've got to give the body time. You can't rush back into doing what you were doing before. Now, the main function of this whole area is weight bearing. So the pelvis is beautifully designed as a weight bearing structure. So the hip joint is, in theory, designed for weight bearing, yeah, because we're supposed to be on 2 legs, walking about, a lot of force going through there. Now the hip joint, because it's a ball and socket joint, it can move in lots of different ways, and that's what we're going to look at today. It can obviously flex, yeah, it can extend, otherwise we couldn't walk. It can abduct, so it can bring your leg across, it can abduct, take it away, adduct, bring it across. It can internally rotate and it can externally rotate. So in a sense, that's brilliant. You know, it can do pretty much everything. On the other side, if you're hypermobile, that's a lot of potential movement that maybe we don't want, because maybe we've got too much movement, yeah? So maybe we sit down, we can do the yoga poses where the legs fall out to the side, or maybe you've been able to do the splits, and so maybe there's too much laxity around here, okay? So we want mobility. The fact that we're designed that way means we're supposed to have the mobility, but we want stability with the mobility, okay? So mobility isn't a bad thing, okay? Hypermobility without control can cause us problems, but mobility in the hip joint is important, but we want it to be stable at the same time. So today's class is about how do we enjoy and appreciate the fact that the hip joint has got all this wonderful movement potential, okay? But how do we encourage control and stability in that very flexible joint, okay? So that's what we're going to be looking at. Unless anyone's got any other questions about the hip joint, I think I've covered. I mean, I've said before, and I think I did a post about it a while ago, just doing oysters or clams, although they're, you know, a good external rotation exercise, it's not enough to give us stable hips, okay? We can't just do oysters and clams, because you see the potential of this thing. It does everything. So if I'm only doing external rotation, and I'm doing, you know, however many clams I've been told to do, what about all the other stuff my hip can do? I'm only working in one plane of motion. I need to be able to control all ranges of motion, okay? So that's why we need that concentric exercise where we're contracting things. No, someone's taken it back, sorry. We need eccentric control where the muscle is lengthening under load. And we also need to add in some isometrics where you're actually stabilizing the joint, okay? So I kind of take this three-point approach to the hip joint. So let's get moving then. Grab your ball and your band and your head cushion. Oh yeah, someone's just asking about this. Trying to get rid of lower back pain. Yeah, as we said, you've got to be careful on your rehab with any surgery, of course, and not push yourself. And, you know, as with anything, listen to your body. Just take your time. You can't rush back to maybe doing what you were doing before. Now, let's get started. So we're going to start lying down. I'm just going to move the camera now. So I'm going to pop you down so you can see my mat. Okay, so if you need a head support, grab it. If there's anything today, obviously, that's not right for you, please don't do it. I will give modifications. But I don't know your bodies, so please look after yourself. Don't do anything that doesn't seem right for you today. So we're going to lie down. So remember, today's class is about mobility with stability, okay? So let's get ourselves comfy on the floor. Okay, I just hope that skeleton doesn't decide to fall on top of me, but hopefully he's stable enough to be there. Okay, so obviously the pelvis, you know, really important part of the body, yeah? Loads, I think it's like 64 muscles joining this area from above and below. You know, I kind of call it like a big train station junction where you've got lots coming in and lots going out. So really important. Let's just rest your hands on your pelvis. Close your eyes if you're happy to. And just take a moment to focus in on your pelvis if you're happy to do that. Now, what I mean by focusing in is, you know, you can see the structure of that pelvis there. Maybe put your hands on those two bony bits I pointed out that kind of stick out on the pelvis and see if they are kind of pointing up to the ceiling. So what's your sort of resting position of the pelvis? There's no right or wrong. If you're here and your bony bits are pointing back at you, that's okay for today. Don't force yourself into this position. So just take a moment to kind of get to know your pelvis. You can rest your hands on it. And I like to feel that every time I exhale, the pelvis is kind of dropping into the floor. So the pelvis takes on its own density. It's a really heavy piece of equipment. Yeah, it's super heavy. You know, I want the bones that we're looking at here are really thick, heavy bones, and the muscles and the ligaments that attach to it are heavy, and they're all intertwined and overlaying each other. There's a density about it. So just take a moment to feel. Notice if you're clenching your bottom or curling up your tailbone. See if you can really find a place of rest. And you know, people talk about the pelvis being like a bowl, and it is kind of shaped like a bowl, isn't it? It's got this big vacuum in the center. Can you feel, if that bowl was filled with water right now, yeah, could you find a place where your water bowl doesn't have any ripples in it? So the water is very calm. So the water is just resting in the bowl, and it's not moving. There's no sort of glistening movements, rippling. It's just there resting. See if you can find that. And the water obviously makes you feel quite heavy as well. So there's a density within the density. Okay, so you're kind of resting in this place. Notice if you've got any tension around the front of your hips, which you might have, okay? If you need to walk your feet further away from you, that might help switch them off. That's okay too. Okay, so be where, if you need to take them wider, whatever works for you. Try and find a place where everything is soft. Okay. Now, we talked about mobility with stability. Now, for me, stability, a big part of stability means control. So we've seen how the hip joint is obviously connected into the pelvis, okay? So we're going to try and move our pelvis, appreciating the density and thinking about the control. So nice, simple pelvic rolls forward and back, okay? So you can keep your hands on those hip joints. Keep present in the weight in the back of the pelvis. Try not to start going front body. Stay in your back body. And so as you roll your pelvis forward, just feel that the top of the pelvis comes off the mat. And if you had water in it, your water would now be pouring down onto the floor, okay? Now feel the back of your pelvis. Don't push with your feet or your thighs. Feel the back of your pelvis coming back. And it can roll all the way back so the water trickles into your belly button. So you feel heavy. Remember, we're dense here, we're dense. So I'm now just going to roll the back of my pelvis forward. Notice how, I've worn really bad colours today because you can't see. But you can probably see how slowly I'm moving. Okay, I'm moving with the least amount of muscular effort because I'm trying to get control. Okay, if I do this, can you see the difference? Here I'm using a lot of effort and I can feel I'm probably going to hurt my back soon because I'm overusing my lumbar spine, my thighs have switched on. We don't want that. That's just big gross movements. Yeah, that's not going to teach us anything about our pelvis. Okay, so let's forget that and see if we can move with this soft, dense, quiet. Okay, so just one more, forward and back. Now, if it's accessible to you, and it might be the smallest thing ever, we're going to try and draw a circle. Now, I'm still feeling my water here, and the water's going to just pour out around the rim of the pelvis. And I'm just drawing a circle now. Now, again, don't get caught up in the front of the body. Focus on the back of your pelvis, and try and draw a circle on the mat with the back of your pelvis. Again, I'm going really slowly. And then I'm just going to go the other way. You may find that it's tight in areas, okay, especially if you've got a tear. You know, the thing labrum tears hate is where you'll start getting hip impingements. They hate things like this, where, you know, physios always do the test where they pull your leg into your thigh, and if it pinches and hurts, that's an impingement, and it's often a sign of a tear. Not always, I'm not saying everyone who gets that has got a tear, but that's just one of the tests they do. And they also take it across, and if it pinches again, that's often a sign. Okay, so let's finish off our circles, and then find your quiet resting place again. Okay, so water is quiet, pelvis is heavy. Now, we talked about the foot impacting the pelvis. There is a relationship between the foot and the pelvis, and otherwise we wouldn't be able to walk. Yeah, so the pressure through the foot. We talked about this in the foot class. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. The push off of the foot drives the pelvis forward. So, hands on pelvis, very gentle, press into one foot. Just press with the whole sole of your foot. And you'll notice probably that your pelvis wants to move. Your bottom might lift off a little bit. You might find you've rotated. Release the foot, let your pelvis return to its density. So I press into my foot and my pelvis moves. When I release my foot, the pelvis drops, okay? So it's a very soft, very much like walking. Yeah, the foot is moving your pelvis. But we're not doing this. I'm not pushing and just, yeah. So you might have just heard my hip snap there when I did that. Some people have snapping hips and they don't hurt, but it just means that the hip flexor is snapping over the head of that femur. And so it kind of pops, and a lot of us have that. Okay, but mine doesn't hurt. It's just, can be a little bit noisy sometimes. Okay, now go ahead and straighten one leg. Okay, so you've got one leg bent. Carry on with the gentle pressing of that foot. So as you press, now we're going to make this slightly bigger now, because as I press into that foot, my hip's going to come off. My knee, I'm trying to get it to travel forward, so I'm not collapsing in, okay? I'm trying to go over my foot, so I'm getting a bit of hip opening here, yeah? If I release my foot, it slowly drops back and it gets dense again. So we press and we open and I release and it rolls back. Very nice for tight lower backs as well. We'll just do 3 each side and back. Okay, so I'm going to bring the other leg back, slide the other one away. And this might feel different, okay, depending on what's going on. So, gentle, how does it feel? It often feels different. Many of us are more connected to one side of the body than the other. So can you press into the sole of your foot? Remember we talked about the tripod last time. Are you able to access your tripod here? Or are you just pushing with one part of your foot? Again, no right or wrong. We're just kind of getting to know what we do. Okay, so we've done, I call those single leg bridges because your bottom's kind of coming off, but we're not obviously going up into a bridge. Not yet, anyway. So slide the other leg back. Now, grab your ball and pop it between your knees. Okay? Check your density. Okay, so we talked about all the ranges of motion that the hip can do. We're going to look at adduction, which is bringing things together. Now, if you've got groiny pain, okay, and I know some of us do, either don't do this one, just hold the ball, or go very, very carefully, because for some people, when you connect with your ball, it can set off groin pain. So please listen to your body, okay? I'm certainly not doing this and going really crazy on it, okay? I'm going to think of the whole skin of my inner thigh, and without losing my density, so without moving my pelvis, I'm going to draw the skin of my inner thigh into the ball. Now just check you don't arch your back when you do that. So are you still quiet here? And then release. So we're doing a little isometric hold as well in the adducted place. Okay, make sure you're still breathing and then release. Okay, if you're not doing it because of groin pain, just holding the ball and breathing will be working your adductors. Okay, so you've got to think that what we're trying to do for for stable hip joints is work that whole circumference of the hip socket. So ideally we want to do exercises that treat the whole circumference. Okay, that's a nice way of looking at it. That's why you don't only want to do one type of exercise for the hips. Okay, I'm going to do one more. Okay, so that's just a little bit. You might feel your inner thigh muscles working, which is a good thing. Okay, now grab your band at the same time. You might need to take the ball out. I'm just going to do this, I'm cheating. And you're just going to tie the band, or a loop band, whatever you've got, around your thighs. So you've still got the ball in there, and then you're going to double knot. Okay? Now this is a really good exercise because if you think about it, what we've done is we've now got hold of all the muscles and the whole structure that is actually attaching to your hip, into your hip socket. So I'm touching the front, the inside, the outside, and the back. So this is like someone holding your thigh for you and stabilizing your hip, okay? So it's a really nice proprioceptive way to understand where our potential weaknesses might be. Now, just being here for a moment, check your density. Make sure you haven't started gripping, let it go. Pelvic floor is relaxed, bottom muscles are relaxed. Just notice that you can feel all this connection around your hip joint. Now, with that new awareness, can you just do your pelvic tilts? Now, what I want you to try and do, and it's harder than it seems, right? Because I want you to try to maintain the balance around the whole circumference. So if you feel that your hamstrings are pushing and doing too much, or you're tightening your quads, or you're squeezing that ball, or you're trying to pull out, I want you to try and maintain tone, muscular tone, around the whole femur. So that everyone is working as a team. Because if everyone is working as a team, we're going to be more stable. If one guy decides they're going to do more work than somebody else, they're potentially going to pull your hip out of alignment. So many of us have very, very tight quads. Yes, because we said earlier, many of us are not connected well into our posterior chain. Now, if I've got very tight quads, what are they going to do? They're going to pull me. Here's my psoas muscle, right, that comes down here and it attaches up into my lower back, right? It comes up here, it kind of does this. Now, if this is super tight, like this band, what's it going to do to my lower back? It's going to pull me here. So my psoas gets shorter and I get this lower back arch, okay? So he's doing way too much and the guys back here that should be helping are not doing enough. So we need this guy to relax a little bit so that other people can get looking, okay? And that's very common, isn't it, to have very, very tight hip flexor. So if you've got a big head cushion, just get rid of it because we're going to do a little bridge now, or a baby bridge. We're going to try and maintain the balance so that not one single muscle takes over, okay? So we've done bridges loads of times before. I think we did it in the foot class because I like it because it wakes up people's feet. So settle in, density, okay? Balance, okay? Find your feet. Breathe, let everything go, preparing, unwinding. Then we can do a tiny little pelvic tilt that we've been working on. Then I'm going to stand into my feet. Now I'm trying to maintain balance around these 360 degrees as I roll up into my bridge. It might be here, I might not be going very high, I might be able to go higher, everyone's different. Okay, now when I'm at the top, what am I doing? I'm not squeezing, hopefully I'm not pulling apart. Have I still got my tripod on the floor? There's lots going on. Maybe I'm feeling a stretch down those tight hips. And then I'm going to keep that. Can you maintain all of that structure as you come down? It's really quite intense for the mind-body connection. because you might find you want to do more in different areas. So let's go. Stand into our feet. Maintain the balance if you can. Doesn't matter how high you're going. Remember, the pelvis needs to be posteriorly tilted. What tends to happen in our bridges is we do this and it hurts our back. So my triangle, my pubic bone is higher than those two bony bits, okay? All my water is poured out of my pelvis down into my chest. Okay, and then I'm going to roll it down, try and maintain that balance, try and maintain the balance. Good, and we're going to do one more. Remember, do what you can, you don't have to do as many as me. Try and find that tripod. Are your feet rolling out? Are they rolling in? Think of the circumference. 360 degrees wrapped around your pelvis. Everyone working as a team. Down we come. And you know, I think that applies to the whole body. If we can get everyone working as a team so that we haven't got imbalances, we're not going to have issues of muscles pulling, because remember, they've got the capability of pulling joints out of their alignment and out, potentially subluxing, dislocating. If everyone can work as a team, the whole body's going to be so much happier. Now, let's get rid of our ball for a second. Pop that on the side. Find your density. Take a moment. Maybe you need to do a little, you can keep your band on. Do a little side to side, little windscreen wiper. Now again, windscreen wiper, it's an interesting exercise because we could easily just throw ourselves around. And what that's doing is just shearing on your lower back. You see, I'm not really doing much to my hips. Gravity is just throwing them about. If we stay dense, and I've got my water, and I literally think of pouring the water very carefully onto the side of the floor, this is control. So I've got internal rotation, I've got external rotation, I've got a bit of hip extension, lots going on. The density of the pelvis rolls you back. Oh, I've got a little shake there. A little bit of eccentric control through my hamstrings there. Now I'm going to roll the other way. I'm not pushing with my feet. I'm going to hit my skeleton, but you guys can go further. I'm not going to let gravity do all the work. I'm going to work with it, and I'm going to drop the density back down. So getting used to that lovely feeling of density will take a lot of pain away from the pelvis, because we do tend to grip. I don't know about you, but you know, gripping pelvic floors, gripping abdomens, gripping glutes, it's all creates tension. Yeah, and we didn't talk about the pelvic floor earlier, but obviously pelvic floor is there in the middle of all of that structure. And you know, I'm not someone who cues sucking in the pelvic floor, but obviously the pelvic floor is responding and acting to whatever it is we're doing, whatever load we're doing. Now, keep your band on. If it's uncomfortable with the band, just take it off. But again, talking about alignment and stability, we're going to do our little knee roll with the band on. So dense, breath. We're going to lift the heel up. And if that's enough for you, that's fine. If you can, this has got to stay dense. Don't take the density away from the pelvis, okay? Try not to as you lift that leg up. Okay, so I've got the band there. It gives me a little bit more resistance, a bit more feedback. Okay, I'm going to hold it there just for a second. Am I still dense? Okay, if I'm not, take a moment. Density does not mean pushing, okay? And that's a common sort of mistake. Don't think that density means to push. Density means to let go, which can be scary, I know. Try the other side. Are you still dense? Dense doesn't mean gripping around the sacrum. Okay, your sacrum needs to go, I'm just going to drop. Then you're going to get some stability. Okay, we didn't talk about SI joint issues, obviously. You've got your SI joint there. If you've got SI joint issues, We don't want to be doing too much sideline work or any at all if you're very, very unstable, because we don't want to be separating the SI joint. Okay? And up. So we're doing hip flexion and hip extension. Okay? Now, bring your feet closer together. If you need to tighten this up, please do so. Mine's gone a bit saggy. Let's do our external rotation. So, density. Let's take the leg out to the side. The other leg has got to stay heavy. The other side of the pelvis has got to stay dense. It doesn't want to do this. Okay? You might hear my dog barking in the background. Please ignore him. We've just had some people arrive. Okay, so keep it heavy. So if you're someone whose leg can flop to the floor, and I know many of you probably can, okay, I don't want you to go to the floor. I tend to tell people to do 10 and 2 on a clock. Okay, so do half the range that you can. Because, remember, we're trying to get control. If I just flop to the floor, which I can't, but if I did, that's not giving me any control. It's not improving my stability. It's not improving that 360-degree control around my hip joint. Okay, and that's what we've got to be thinking about. Okay, one more. If your back is arching, reduce your range. Okay, now, I'm going to do one little isometric, then we're going to change position. How are we doing for time? Yes, sorry, we're going. Hope you're okay for time. So we're just going to lift the leg up, and if you can, you're just going to hold on to the front of your thigh. Okay, and just very, very gently, obviously, please look after yourself, but a little isometric, can you press the thigh towards you at the same time as pressing into the leg? So I'm pushing and pulling, as it were. Okay, and then just release. So we press. So it's a little isometric. The muscles at the front contract. Remember we said that many of us have tight hip flexors. So they're contracting, but then you let them go and they relax. So a lot of the times they lose the ability to relax. They don't know what it feels like. So we contract and then relax. Density. Okay, let's go on the other side. Again, one side might feel stronger. Obviously look after your shoulders. This might not be suitable for everyone. Don't try not to let your shoulders come all the way off the floor. So we press. Are you still feeling heavy when you're pressing, or is everything sort of popped up off the floor? And I press. And I press. And then I release. Fabulous. Take that away. Okay, now we are going to go sideline. So if you don't have SI joint issues, side-lying is a really good thing to do. Okay, you can prop yourself up with cushions, of course, if you don't like lying like this. This isn't for everybody, so use whatever you need to do. You can keep your band on actually if you're wanting more resistance. Okay, so this is your abduction, taking away. Okay, so you can use your band here wrapped around your thigh. You can do without it. You're sitting on a chair, okay, in a chair position. Now remember, we're talking about the hip joint, we're not talking about the knee joint. So I'm thinking of working from here because I'm abducting the hip. Okay, so I'm going to lift from there, not too high, and we're not externally rotating. This isn't an oyster. This has to stay in there. Has to stay, even, that's what I do. I like to lift my foot higher. We want to keep it square. Okay, so we all cheat, right? We'll either do this and the foot will come up, or we'll try and rotate. If that happens, we're not using our abductors. Okay, you want to work the specific muscles that abduct the hip. Yeah, oysters are great. Yeah, if you want, we're doing, that's external rotation. It's a different thing. These are the guys that we want to target today. Just up and down. Slowly. We're going to do one more. Hopefully you're feeling it here. Okay, you might be feeling it down here. Now, what you can also do is think of that 360 degrees and try and draw a circle here. Okay, so drawing a little circle, you're doing everything, aren't you? Hip extension, adduction, flexion, abduction. Probably got some internal and external, pretty much everything going on here for your hip. Pretty tough, have a rest if you need to. I'm only doing 3 in each direction. Try and relax your foot. Try not to drive with your foot or your knee. Think of that lovely hip joint and how you're stabilizing the hip joint. Oh, did you feel that in your glutes? Should we swap over, do the other side, and then we'll do a little bit of weight bearing, because remember we said the hip joint wants to weight bear. That's its job, right? So we do want to do a little bit of weight bearing through it. So I'm thinking of my hip. I'm going to try not to externally rotate or internally rotate. I'm trying to keep a straight line. Oh, there, I was cheating again. So, straight line. That's where this band could be quite useful, because it's much harder to cheat if you've got the band. Obviously, it's harder because you're going to feel things more. I think we did 5 here. You don't have to prop up like this. You can lie down. You know, don't worry. Don't copy me if you've got neck issues. Just so I can see. Okay, have a little rest. Shall we try that 360 degrees? So, coming forward, up, back. You want to get your hip extension. Make sure you're not falling backwards, okay? If you're tight in your hips, we might be doing very baby ones, because I'd rather you did baby ones and try to do a big circle, but your pelvis was rolling like this. Because this isn't hip stability, is it? This is like rolling around on my lower back. I'm looking for hip stability, which might mean it's very small. I don't know how many we've done, but it's burning a little bit. So I think that's probably enough. Have a little rest, tap it out. Very good. Okay, so we've got mobility, but we've got stability as well, which is brilliant. Okay. Let's come over, final little exercises, if you're still with me. 4-point kneeling. I know many of us, I haven't got a yoga block, but I know many of us struggle to be on our hands. So you can get some books or a yoga block and bring it up so your elbows are here. Okay, that's one option. If you haven't got anything nearby today, you can come down onto here, or you could put your hands on a chair. But that's going to be a little bit tricky for this one actually. It'll be okay for the hip softener, might be a bit tricky for the weight bearing. Okay, so probably best to come down here if you don't want to use your wrists. Okay, but I quite like to prop people up so it's a little bit higher. Okay, I'm going on my wrists. Okay, spiraling those arms out. Okay, trying to keep, not collapsing, trying to keep that nice dense pelvis. So even here, this might just be enough for you. Can you find density in your pelvis here? Yeah, so it's not tipping forward, it's not rounding, it's resting. And let's just wag our tail from side to side. So your bowl of water is just wagging. Sorry, I can't read the comments, but yeah, I still haven't figured out how to read the comments afterwards. So if anyone knows how to, I'd love to respond to them. I'm not being rude, I just don't know where they go. When the class is finished, I have no idea what happens to them. Okay, come back to your dense pelvis. We're going to hip soften. You can take your knees wider if it's more comfortable. Think of that density and just hinge backwards a little bit. Pelvic floor is stretching. Okay, again, you can't see very well, but I haven't collapsed. Okay, here I don't have a lot of weight in my hands. This is weight bearing, which is what it wants to do. I haven't collapsed, okay? I'm going to use the legs to lift me back up with control. My legs are shaking a little bit, yours might be too. So going back, soft shoulders, no pushing. Quite nice, let the shoulders drape on your rib cage. Use your legs weight bear, feel the work through that 360 degrees. I can really feel pretty much all those muscles working together. Little tremor in my hamstrings, my inner thighs. That's it, and up we come. Very good. Take a little rest if you need to off your wrists. We're going to do a little bit of hip extension, tiny bit of strength work to finish off, okay? If it's not for you today, that's fine. You could do it standing, okay? What I'd like to do is tabletop, sliding the leg out. Now that might be enough, okay, which is fine. You've got your hip extension. Try not to lock the knee, so keep it soft. And you're going to slide it back in. Hip flexion. So hip extension with control, hip flexion. Okay, perfectly okay. If you want to go to the next level, just swapping legs, taking it out. Now, can I use the back of my leg, so glute, top of hamstring, to lift my leg a little bit? Okay, really feel that contraction through the back and then down. And we lift and lower slowly. One more time. If you're not doing this, just carry on sliding in and out. And back in, take a little break off your wrists. We just need to do that on the other leg. And then we'll take a child's pose if your knees and hips don't mind child's pose. So here we go. Find the back of the leg and lift. So control. Pelvis is still heavy. Yeah, it's still dense. And up. I think we did 3. Coming back. Wide knees if you can tolerate. And have a little sit back. And just have a little rest. Do some wrist circles. If you don't like sitting like that, just come onto your side and come into a little fetal position. Just to let your legs have a little rest. Whatever works for you. Okay, but just now, take a moment to let the pelvis, again, it doesn't matter if your pelvis is up here, yeah, it really doesn't matter where it is, but can you feel the density? So even in a resting position, I want to feel that pelvis dropping and releasing. That's it. Very nice. And then slowly coming up. Okay, so that was our hip class. I think we did about 45, well, I think we were moving for about 35 minutes. Any questions before we go on any of that? I hope it made sense. So that idea of 360 degrees is going to give us stability and mobility, yeah? The stability is going to come from the control. And the way we do that is by doing things very slowly with awareness, okay, rather than just throwing our legs around. So many videos. What's this? The struggle where to start. I haven't found one. Oh, they go so quickly. I can't read everything. Yes, I hope this kind of gives you a good starter pack for hip stability, okay? Again, very slow is going to build the control. Awareness of that range is going to build the control. Appreciating the pelvis is going to give you that control. I hope you like the idea of that density of the pelvis, which you can use in sitting and in standing. So when we're sitting, the pelvis is still dense. Yeah, sorry, Lorna's chatting on there. So the pelvis is still dense even when you're sitting. So you're not trying to hold yourself up, you're actually settling into this density, okay? So hopefully that gave you some ideas to play with. We're here in a month's time, first Thursday in October. Thank you everyone, I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe shoulders. We haven't done shoulders, we've done feet, we've done knees, we've done hips, maybe we've done ribs. Maybe we need to look at shoulders next time. If you would like that, let me know. So thank you for watching. Really good turnout today. Lovely. It's so lovely to move with other people as well. I think it's brilliant. Yeah, hands would be great. Okay, we could maybe do that as well. Thank you everyone for your lovely messages. Really appreciate it. So until next time, keep working on that hip stability with mobility and stay zebra strong. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you in October. See you soon. Thank you everyone. Lovely messages. I really appreciate you hanging out with me here. Thank you. Bye bye. Yes, please, to shoulders. Okay. Shoulders it is, guys. It's a deal. Shoulders. Okay. Bye bye, everyone.